right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Archaeology with Flint Dibble. And I want to thank you all for tuning in. We have another really awesome live stream. And just a reminder, make sure if you like this to give it a like and leave a comment. We have to do what we can to fight the algorithm to get really good stuff out there. And we want to promote these working classicists here. So I am joined today with Miri Teixeira. I was going to get your last name wrong. Sorry, Miri. My name sucks too. With Miri Teixeira, who is the editor of this fantastic book, A Periodic Table of Greek Mythology. And she's also the co-founder of Working Classicists, which we'll talk about. It's an initiative to get together and make classics more accessible for people from a working class background. And she is a video games journalist and a university administrator, though she's not like the president of a university. So, you know, it's not that kind where we have to go on strike. Yeah, right at the bottom. There you go. And then we're also joined with George Connor, who is also a co-founder of Working Classicists. And he is a state school classics and Latin teacher. And he's the one person here besides me with a classics MA. That he got, I guess, late in life. So that's pretty cool. I got it late in life too, but that's just because I took forever. And then we're also joined by Jacqueline Monroe, who and everyone here, by the way, is an author on the book A Periodic Table of Ancient Greek Mythology. And she started volunteering with Working Classicists back in 2023-24. And she's a media relations and PR officer in Scotland's creative arts sector. And she's a big fan of classics through reading and video games. Me too on that end. I like that. But she never had it in school, so she's sort of coming to this from that kind of perspective. And then lastly, we're joined by Ross McGovern, who is a learning disability support worker, and he attended private school as a kid from a working class background. And he felt that attending private school actually didn't help him because he didn't have that money or social affluence to support things. So he's enjoyed becoming involved again in classics as an adult. So hi, everyone. It's really, really awesome to have you here on Archaeology with Flint Dibble. And I'm definitely a classicist as well. All my degrees in archaeology come from classics departments. So I've taught Latin just like George and had to suffer through that. You might like it more than me. And so we're here because just a couple weeks ago, a new book was published, this awesome new book, The Periodic Table of Greek Mythology. And so, and we'll also talk about this organization, Working Classicists, that they are all involved with, so we can try to get word out for it, because it does a lot of good in today's world. So who wants to start?
Well, I could give you a little bit of background about where Working Classicists comes from.
Yeah, sure.
I trained as an English teacher. I'm a high school English teacher, and I was hired by my current school as a high school English teacher. But within about 2 years of beginning at my current school, I decided I actually wanted to pursue classics more professionally. So I did high school classical studies, high school Latin. It was like that scene from Elf with the one adult in the room full of kids in the exam hall. After that, I did a BA and a master's. All the while building a classics department from scratch in my state school. I never had classics when I was at school. Mm-hmm. And I came to this at 38, like 10 years ago now. So, but in the process of doing that, I realized there was a problem with state school classics in Scotland. And if the trajectory kept going the way it was going, it would probably no longer be available to state school pupils. And at that point, I decided that maybe I had something to offer. And what I came up with was the name Working Classicists. And I thought we could make some T-shirts. At which point Miri said, maybe that's actually underselling the concept. Maybe you're capable of doing a bit more than that. So we had a big meeting and we kind of came up with the idea of a rallying point for classics in the state sector in Scotland. And everything has sort of followed from there. So we try to publish new writers on the website every couple of weeks or so. And it's allowed a few people to get a break in the area of classics, which, as you know, can be quite competitive because it is quite a small pool. And we've also kind of cultivated not even cultivated, we've gathered quite a community of people to show that classics goes beyond the barriers of schools. People can be classicists and be enthusiasts in their own time. And this is something which has become increasingly important to us. The idea that classics in schools is one thing, and we are doing a lot of work to try and improve the situation, especially in state schools. But we also have to have an eye on classics in the wider public. And this book, which has been rather magnificently edited by Miri, I am going to say that, is another step towards kind of popularizing classics. But within it, we've also taken the opportunity to give a number of writers their first published break. And we feel really, really proud of that. So that's more or less what we're about, I suppose. And we would like the discipline to be in a better health, but we are working with the resources we have. You'll be aware as much as anyone, Flint, that funding in education is, to say it's dwindling is an understatement.
Yeah.
So when it comes to minority subjects like classics, well, they're called minority subjects. Essentially, that's a label that allows schools to kill them. Yeah. So within that environment, we're just trying our best to kind of raise awareness and give a platform to people with an enthusiasm.
Yeah, and I think in that sense you're in the right place, because I'm just building this channel from the ground up in a sense, and just trying to highlight that kind of stuff. I mean, I see so much adversity for classics, for archaeology, for all these related disciplines that are under threat, ancient history, and it's just, you know, we have to do what we can to reach out to people, and thankfully we have the internet to be able to do that in a much easier, more accessible way, and build these kind of connections and networks. We did get a nice comment in the chat saying Working Classicists is a great name, which I have to agree. It is a real killer name for what you do. It really sums it up in such a fundamental way. And I mean, you know, I came to classics in a really weird way. And I feel like some of you might appreciate this story. It's not one that I always tell publicly. So, you know, I come from a probably more of a middle class background than a working class background. But my dad was a professor of anthropology and archaeology. And that's how I ended up going to Penn, because I got the major discount for being a faculty brat. And while I'm there, I started off majoring in philosophy and then history, and I'm taking all these classes in ancient Roman and Greek history. And I had no idea that there was such a thing called classics. I'd never heard of it. And so all of a sudden, I'm told you should start majoring in classics. And I'm like, what is classics? Like, it doesn't, the name doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm thinking like classical music, classical literature, like, you know, like novels and stuff. And so, you know, to me, that name, it immediately sounds posh and upper class. And so to me, I think it's important that we think about the words and the names we use too, because that name is so inaccessible.
I think you're right that the name for the subject itself is not helpful sometimes. And I know that there are moves in certain areas to kind of get away from classics as the label, because you say it to the majority of people, an ordinary person on the street, and you're right, classic rock, maybe, classic cars, perhaps. Classics, it just doesn't ring. Whereas if you said ancient history, they get it instantly. So I think that the name has proved to be a kind of a, on the one hand, it's a barrier that prevents people getting in, but also that helps to build the wall of privilege, which allows other schools to keep it to themselves, because nobody else really knows what it's about. So I have absolute sympathy with that perspective where you're thinking, this is a brilliant subject. I have no idea what it's called.
Yeah, and to be honest as well, like the name classics is kind of, I think someone's put in the chat, like it is kind of seen as ancient Greek stuff, ancient Roman stuff, but actually when you say ancient history, that can be anywhere, that can be the whole world, anything that's ancient. And I think that's a lot of the time that's more what people are talking about, especially our kind of people that we talk to, people that write for us. They're writing about ancient stuff all over the world, not just, you know, Greece and Rome. And I think classics has got that kind of, it is almost like you just picture Greece and Rome with classics, even though that's not necessarily the case. It's like that's it's kind of a split, even if you do know what it is, but
I think it started off as being very much ancient Greek and Roman literature. And so those were the classics that everybody's trained in. And then it slowly expanded to include sort of the study of history, the study of art, the study of archaeology. And then to some people, it might mean all of the ancient Mediterranean, because that eventually becomes Rome and beyond. So therefore, it could include Iron Age Gaul, even sort of pre-Roman stuff. And so in that sense, it doesn't have while its core is ancient Greece and Rome, it has a fuzzy boundary in many ways that varies based on which institute or who you're talking to or whatnot. Yeah. So on that note, I think we should dive into the book, because one of the key components of classics in the public imagination and in school and whatnot is, of course, ancient Greek mythology. It's what we see kind of everywhere. And so, you guys put together just what I think is a beautiful looking book, a periodic table of Greek mythology, and you organize these kind of different figures. Oh, that doesn't work. I have a PowerPoint, I guess. It's not as nice of a photo because I just took it with my phone, but you have kind of these figures here organized into a periodic table of these kind of ancient Greek mythological sources. And it's organized. You had how many authors contributing?
117.
117. Jeez, how did you organize that?
Personally fed back and edited every single one of them.
Communicated
with every single author and gave precise editing for each one.
It was a busy year.
I imagine you had to get them all to cut their text by 80%.
To be honest, it sounds like a lot of work, and it was a lot of work. It definitely was, because part of what we do with the zine and other things is that we don't want to assume anything. We don't want to assume a level of anything, really. So it's we had accessibility requests kind of baked into it, and so I wanted to make sure that each person got personalized feedback, and it was useful to them, so that not just because our book looks good, but also for some of them maybe it's the first thing they've written, so it's important that they get that feedback. I think that was what took the longest. In terms of what actually came in, it was all really high quality from the moment it came in. I could not fault any of the writers, and they really got the brief, they really understood it, they somehow condensed it to 300 words. I don't know how. I'm glad that I didn't have to write, because that's beyond me. But the actual quality that came in was amazing. It was just a case of kind of getting it to read from start to finish as a book when there's that many different voices and that many different people. That was the main thing.
That's a big challenge.
Sorry to interrupt. One of the things which I think you managed to navigate quite well was there is such a scope for overlap, because as you'll know, Greek myths, characters appear in one myth and then they crop up in another myth. So to have the book not refer constantly to myths that have already been mentioned, I think was a real achievement, that you can just read the page for the character and you get the necessary information for the character. It was it was quite it was a sight to see you working through it.
I had post-it notes of every single footnote that people had submitted, and I think it went up to 200 and something post-it notes, and I was putting them together if they were the same one, and then deciding who was the first person to get that footnote, and they could have that footnote, nobody else could have it, and kind of taking it off there. So it was chaotic probably, but we just wanted to make sure that, because it was a fundraising thing for us, and all of these people very generously gave us their time and gave us their skills. So I didn't want to just kind of slap something together and be like, well, that'll do. That's a book. It's vaguely book shaped, kind of wanted it to be something where they had a good experience from it. There was a sense of kind of community, or I hope that there was, and that in the end it's something that they can be proud of as well. So I think that's why it took so long, because the stuff they submitted genuinely was just really good already. It's more just getting it to be coherent. So
I think it strikes a really good balance of that as well, in that coherence throughout it, but also it is very individual voices, and everyone came at it at their own individual angles, whether it's from a more academic background or a more storytelling kind of voice. And so it's a nice little change of pace each time you read a new one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was my impression of it too, is because there were so many different voices there, it did have a unified feel, but at the same time, each one sort of highlighted different aspects. Some of them ended by talking about this character in modern movies. Others ended by talking about the etymology of modern terms that come from it. Like I remember I just read Herculean from Hercules, that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it had that very, each one was a little different, but it created a nice coherent whole. Who came up with the idea of it being a periodic table?
That was George. He's been using it for years.
I put together a periodic table of Greek myths as a wall display in my classroom some years ago. It was an interactive one. It was all laminated, so kids could take off an element and go and do some work on that one character and then put it back on the wall. And the various games that you can play using it as well in the classroom. It was incredibly useful. So, by the way, if anybody wants a copy of the wall display, email us via the website. I'm happy to give that away. But when Conte Banales reached out to us, and by the way, baked into what everything we're saying is a massive thank you to Conte Banales, because they just reached out via Twitter and said, hello, would you like to publish a book of any variety? And that simply never happens. It never happens.
They said that, and that we would also get the profits from it as a way of like fundraising for working classicists. That was kind of what they were thinking. They were like, it's like an ongoing donation from us, which that was just amazing, honestly, from them.
Absolutely. So we sat down, and at first we decided pretty quickly that the periodic table would be a good first book for working classicists, and we had initially the idea that we would write it ourselves, but very quickly, Miri was really taking the lead on this. She said, actually, there's an opportunity here for an entire community to get published rather than just you and I. So we sat down and thrashed it out, and then we met Jackie and had some conversations around which elements would go in, which ones wouldn't, how we would group them together, and so on. And within about a week or 10 days of getting that first contact from Conte Banales, we were up and running. So it's been weird. I'm currently, my school is getting knocked down. Not at this moment. We're moving to a new school shortly.
Okay.
And it's felt very much like I hate to use the phrase, but like it's come full circle, because last Thursday I actually had to take my periodic table off the wall, and it was like within a week or so of the launch of the book, and it felt like it'd come off my wall and gone straight out into the world last week. So it was a poignant moment, but that's the origin of the book.
That actually sounds really interesting, and I think that is weird, the timing though of it going off your wall and then out into the world, I have to say. And so this is available, just so people who are listening, that you can buy it from Conte Banales in the US and the UK, you mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm. Anywhere really from them. Yeah.
Okay. So anywhere in the world even. Okay, so that link I just put in the chat is the place to go to check it out. And that's the best place to go to help support the initiative of working classicists as well.
So I've just noticed Josh in the comments saying that Assassin's Creed Odyssey and gives him a degree of expertise here, and I 1,000,000% agree with him. Almost all of my Greek mythology knowledge didn't start with Assassin's Creed, but I'm still playing Assassin's Creed.
George lives in that game.
Literally, I live in that world.
Yeah.
Legitimately, when I was like first discovering and like wanted to learn more, Assassin's Creed Odyssey Discovery mode is where I spent a lot of time.
Yeah.
I use it in the classroom, I play it at home. It's just
now that I have a computer that can handle streaming some games, I might try to stream that game a little bit.
That'd be cool.
I think that'll be fun to sort of talk about how it depicts ancient Athens in different places, because they did such a great job of getting in touch with scholars to figure out how to portray those spaces, and I think in that sense it's one of the best games, especially looking at the what was it, the photo of Matt Damon as Odysseus, and every single classicist in the world is groaning over this, and it's just like, no, why did they screw this up? Why did they screw this up? Look at him. He looks like, I don't know, what the heck is this?
It looks like a toilet brush made of
know,
leather.
He looks And you know what's so funny is yesterday I saw on Reddit, in like the ancient history or some subreddit, about this image, and the person who started the thread was trashing it, saying it's totally anachronistic, and then some reply said no, they did it because they were saying they should have a boar's tusk helmet and all this other stuff, and some reply said no, those boar's tusk helmets are what's anachronistic, and wrote like a long essay that was completely wrong historically about how Matt Damon should be dressed. And that wrong comment got far more upvotes than anything else, including than the originator of the post. And it was just like total misinformation. And it's just like, yeah, so, oh well. Oh well. So, okay.
It's
so
almost like social media requires moderators. Or extraordinarily outlandish like that.
It's almost like if you want to know whether something is correct or not, you need to have people with experience and expertise that can assess it. If you see what I mean, because that is the world we live in, unfortunately. Just upvotes.
That's what they want you to think.
So okay. So let's think about the book itself. I don't know, why should everybody who's watching and go buy this? What's your favorite thing about the book, let's say, for each of you? Let's start with Ross, because Ross has not said anything.
I think one thing we were talking before about what working classicists is, and honestly, it feels like a movement to me, because I have never written I've written little bits and pieces all over the place for a long time, but I've never written for anything where so much care was taken to make sure everybody was taken seriously, everybody was listened to, everybody. I mean, it's properly been driven by, what's close to George and Mary's hearts, which is, this. It's the. It's really been quite moving to watch it all come together, and the number of people that Mary was able to wrangle for this, it's just been extraordinary. It's really something I feel honored to be part of because of that, and the writing comes out beautifully. It's worked amazingly well.
Yeah. And Miri, while searching for your email to me about this live stream, I found your email inviting me to participate. But I got that while I was on chemo, so I did not really notice it or see it or
That's
think
a fair
about
excuse,
it.
honestly.
So I apologize for not participating.
That's a bigger deal. Yeah. Because we didn't want to do the thing where we didn't want to do the thing where you put out a call on social media, because in my experience, often the same people will put themselves forward quite a lot, and it's not to say that their voices aren't valuable or they've not got a lot to say, but it's that sometimes you have to, if you dig just like a little bit and you like kind of coax people a little bit, you're going to get a more interesting spread of people, I think. So yeah, that was quite I would definitely, there are things that I would improve next time in terms of canvassing for finding people. Oh yeah. But yeah, it was nice to see so many different people kind of get involved with it as well. And at the start, when we started, I was like, oh, people are gonna have to double up, like some people are gonna have to do two, and like, so it was nice. It was a relief that everyone was so kind of, I don't know, just keen to get involved with it.
I would also say that way of reaching out, though, and not just like broad spectrum call out, like, is important, because a lot of people, when they are from working class backgrounds or hobbyist background or whatever, if they'd have seen a call out, they'd have gone like, oh, I'm not qualified to do that. Yeah. That's not for me. And because they haven't got the qualifications or the traditional route. Whereas because you're reaching out and saying like, we want you to, we're inviting you to, you're opinion, your perspective is valued, and they go like, oh, okay, maybe this is for me. So I think that was why it was a really important approach to it as well.
Yeah, I've had that with organizing conferences. If you just put a call out for whoever, you just get the more confident people, the people who are used to engaging and who feel, and so this way you get hobbyist people who have just played Assassin's Creed, but feel like they can contribute something because you've said, hey, you do such a great job with your Assassin's Creed streams. You clearly do your research. And, I mean, this is something that I come up against when fighting pseudoscientists. They say, but scholarship is not accessible. And it's like, no, our goal is mostly, at least my goal, maybe not all of my colleagues' goal, but my goal is to try to make it as accessible as possible. It's not about having a degree. It's about having an interest in trying to promote accessible, accurate, fun information. Yeah.
Like people had, anecdotally, I know that a lot of the people that wrote for the book are not classicists. They're not academics in their full-time job. They may have a degree in it, or they may have studied it, or, and everything in the book was fact-checked to a PhD level, because obviously we don't want stuff going out that isn't true. But it's like, a lot of people, it's not their background necessarily, but it's something that they really care about, or they're really interested in, or whatever. And there's no difference in quality. Like, there was absolutely, like, not even from the work arriving to me unedited, there was zero difference in quality between the two, for sure.
So, okay, what else? Who's your favorite character from the book, each of you?
Well, Medea, because that was my so Medea is my section, and I am obsessed with her. And I think, to kind of quickly sum up, I think I am an example of the pure enthusiast, hobbyist person that the working classicist is sort of designed to platform, in that I went to a state school in a poor background area and literally hadn't heard of it until 5 years ago during lockdown. I read the Song of Achilles and I played Hades all around the same time, and I was like, these stories are beautiful and these characters are amazing. And you know that thing where you're watching a movie and you're like, oh, how accurate was this really? So I was like Googling like the characters from the game and things like that. And it literally just spiraled from there, and I became obsessed. And then I read The Tale of the Greek Heroes by Roger Lansing Green and got to Jason's section, and it said Medea, the Witch Maiden. And I was like, that sounds like my kind of gal. so then that spewed a whole obsession into reading about Medea, and so she was my section, and I just absolutely love her. I think I'm gonna get a tattoo of her at some point. But it's because that, like, I think when you're reading sort of more ancient texts and things like that, and the women are obviously depicted in certain ways, and they're very much tools to the male heroes of the stories, or they're being tortured and horrible things are happening to them, and that's very true. That is still very true. But I just found Medea very interesting because she has so much nuance and so much more to her that I just wasn't expecting, because I was like, oh, it's just going to be all about the men and their thing. And so I was reading it, I was like, wait, hang on, Medea did everything. Medea literally like saved the whole day, but it's known as Jason. So it was just, it was mind-blowing to me.
So what's your favorite anecdote of Medea?
In terms of what's my favorite like part of
her... What did she do? What's your favorite thing? Come on.
Oh, okay,
share your love.
One of the things that really struck me when I was reading it, Euripides' Medea, when her and Jason are having like the massive blowout argument, because he's gone off and found a new princess, and it really struck me because the argument they were having, like, you would hear it in the modern day, like between couples now. I feel like the language they were using, the things that it was like classic gaslighting. It was like I did everything for you, you do nothing around here. Like, it just, I don't know, it just felt so contemporary, and I was so shocked at how, like, I don't know, I was just surprised at how, like, things from way back ancient history, we're still doing them. It's the same. We're the same people with the same flaws and everything. So it was that like fight they had, and the fact that Jason, to me, just felt like your really crappy ex-boyfriend. Like, I just found it really relatable. And that's why, to me, this is all about like interpretations. Like, classics is interpreting things. And that's why I think another reason this book is so important, because the more diverse people you get looking at this subject, the more interpretations you're going to get. They're going to see things that have never been uncovered before because they've only been looked at by a very specific group of people. So I read it and I go like, I see this kind of very modern relationship and type of womanhood and things like that. And, you know, different people have different perspectives that come out.
Good. Yeah, I think that connection to the past, it's sort of an intimate thing that we can foster. It teaches us all to respect humans because, you know, the past is a foreign country, but at the same time, the people are people like us. So, yeah.
It's
cool.
Quite interesting. The whole area of Greek mythology is interesting. I think Jackie's onto something here with the notion that the interpretation of myth reflects the society that's telling it. So to have a collection like this, on the one hand, it's an introduction to Greek mythology, but it's also sort of a snapshot of the society that's currently reading Greek myths. But also it's kind of a wider lens than mythology normally gets, you know, in terms of the people writing about Greek mythology. So I think it's an interesting read in terms of, you know, for example, reading Medea and not thinking, but she killed her kids, and trying to see that actually there's a more contemporary interpretation. There is, you know, you can look back over retellings over literally thousands of years, but this is an interpretation of 2025, and I think that's a really valuable thing to see in print.
And I think as well that 2025 is no more homogenous than, you know, 2000 BC or whatever. It's like you don't just have like the time period. You have the time period, and then you have all the people within it. And I think that was another driving force behind the selection of people, is that like reading a story, any of these stories really, from, you know, any one of our backgrounds would be completely different. If you are, you know, from a working class background and you're reading stuff, you'll relate to different stuff. If you are from a non-white background, you'll relate to different stuff. If you're from LGBT community, you'll relate to different stuff. If you're a woman, different stuff. If you have a disability, it's like, and so if we aren't displaying that full breadth of, you know, all the different kind of people that can be classicists and people that can be interested, if we're not letting all these different voices give their opinion on, you know, well, this spoke to me in this way, then how are we gonna assess what it is in 2025, you know, fairly? I think that was quite important to it as well.
Yeah. It also, I always find it really interesting when people get kind of gripe about retellings and things like that, because I'm like, it's all retellings. It's retellings all the way down.
Yeah, of course.
Like like they, you know, when Euripides wrote Medea, he was adding stuff. He was retelling it. He was changing it. So I find it, you know, and like the whole thing about she kills her kids, she doesn't in every version. And, you know, it's arguably the most interesting version, but, you know, there's all sorts of different versions. There's a version where she kills her brother and chops him into pieces. Actually, in the Argonautica, I think it's just Jason stabs him and she's really mad at him for it. So Medea gets a bit of a bad rap. She didn't necessarily, you know.
We have a question about Medea in the chat.
Give it to me. Did Medea blame Jason or the other woman? Well, Medea, she's a vengeful gal, right? She blames everyone. She kills the other woman, who is a princess, by sending her a beautiful dress soaked in poison that literally burns the skin off of her. And then her dad, the king, obviously goes to cradle his poor daughter, and also burns to death because he's now touching the garments. And then she also blames Jason. And depending how you read it, she either kills their children to spite him because he betrayed her, or because she's killed the king. They're like, a mob's after them and they're going to die anyway. So she kind of kills them as a mercy. But she gets away with it. She flies away on a dragon's chariot to Athens. Yes.
Now, who couldn't love a story like that? That is the, you see, that's the kind of, my son who is so passionately into this stuff now. We'd call that pure metal. That's what that is, you know? Yeah.
Okay, so what else did you write about? Ross, what did you write about?
I wrote about Pyramus and Thisbe,
Okay.
who, to my shame, I'd not heard of before I was offered the chance, and it's it's essentially Romeo and Juliet, but more gory because people are getting there's a bigger knife, things like that. But it's beautiful and tragic as well. The one I've been really enjoying actually going over which is the one that I've always loved, is Tiresias, because when I was at school, classics was kind of weaved up with, and I was at private school, which is also called public school here, helpfully. But it was one of those places where you paid your money, your kids would study classics and Latin and Greek. And it was astonishing to see just how much the attitude, even of the teachers, was that you're doing this to prove that you're rich. That was it. To prove that you're above other people. I mean, it was virtually put like that. So when I first got into the Tiresias story, it was really out of myself. I was an incredibly pretentious teenager, and I don't think kids today are pretentious enough, because they just but nowadays all the ones I meet just want to get jobs and be happy. That's no way to live. So we got, it was only through the Wasteland that I came across Tiresias, and I really loved the figure, because I'm very interested in let's call it the whole transitions section in this book, but and I always have been. So I imagined having this a club called Sweet Tiresias, which has yet to happen, but may happen. But then later on, I went to do theology, and I remember what stood out to me, and what didn't seem to stand out to many people, was the idea that Eve fancying Adam was a punishment. Your desire will be for your husband. That was a punishment. You will fancy this loser over here. And then when I got further into Tiresias, I realized, that's a punishment, getting to live as a woman, which I think reflects a lot about the way it was looked at. And I'm still exploring Tiresias. It's labyrinthine, not to introduce one pun too many, but yeah.
Cool. Tiresias is just a crazy character in general. He shows up in so many different places, doing so many different things. Okay. How about Miri? What did you write about?
Well, I can't pick a favorite because all the writers are my babies, and if I start picking favorites.
But so you didn't write about one of the at all? No. Okay.
No, I wrote the intro and I did the editing, and that was where I drew a line. At that point. George wrote one there.
George, all right. Who did you write, George?
Well, I was asked to provide a sample for what a page might look like. So I just off the top of my head, I wrote down 300 words about Zeus, all of which could amount to he's an arsehole, he sleeps with anything that moves. That's the gist of Zeus, as far as I can tell. But then about 2 months or 3 months later, it was like, well, that's the page on Zeus. So I was sort of aghast that something I kind of rushed it. So I quickly went back in and was kind of referencing things and changing things around. Because if I'd chosen a character with any degree of thought or real consideration, I would have chosen, I don't know, Arachne or Callisto or like one of the Actaeon, maybe. These are characters whose myths really speak to me. The myths of Zeus, if they do speak to me, it's in a kind of it's with a powerful sense of disappointment in my gender. So, whereas, Actium, that is a myth that says an awful lot about reverence and faith, and Arachne does something similar, but it's about the individual spirit of humans in the face of the gods. So the myths that really speak to me are the ones which are a little, I don't know, the lessons are worn a little bit more lightly, rather than the myths of Zeus, which often amount to do as you're told, he's the guy in charge.
Yeah, it's quite interesting how like a lot of modern religions, because I grew up going to like local churches and stuff, and you'd sing all these songs about, oh, God's our mate or whatever. Like it's got that kind of vibe to it. Whereas like I feel like when you look at ancient religions, it's like, well, you'll just do what you're told and you'll be thankful. It's very kind of, they're not your friends, they don't even like you, they're not really fussed about you.
That goes some way to answering the question that's in the chat from Meaty to 23.
Which, George, you asked in advance. You can say dickhead. It's okay.
I know our values have changed, and I view things with modern lenses. Why does Zeus in some Greek myths sound like a huge dickhead? I think I'm not an expert on Greek religion, but I suspect it's to do with the notion that for the ancient Greeks, it wasn't necessarily about loving the gods. The gods demanded respect, and you had to carry out the necessary rituals in order to appease them, in the hope that they might be benevolent towards you. So there was no sense of loving the gods. And Zeus, I guess, in that sense, he's just this, he's a force, he's a power. And he's the god that you really, really don't want to irritate. So he was reverenced, but I would question how many people would actually have loved Zeus.
I think it's more like an abusive parent, if anything.
Yeah.
It's like, don't piss them off. They might occasionally remember a birthday, and then you've got to be really, really happy about it.
Yeah.
Aside from that, just avoid.
I think even in the myths and literature and stuff as well, he's still a huge dickhead. And they write it as such. It's and his relationship with other gods, you read it and they're like, and they don't like each other, and especially Hera. And
yeah, like they're always
God.
They're always getting at each other as well. It's like they're very They're kind of very petty as well.
I think amongst in the chat here, we do have some people of faith, and I don't. And one of the reasons for that is because I can't make it work in my head, the idea that there is a single God who simultaneously loves you and does terrible things in the world. But the idea of Greek gods, where they're actually irritated with each other and they do mean and spiteful things, and they're not necessarily friends of humanity, that in some ways makes a little more sense to me. Don't get me wrong, I am not making any sacrifices to Artemis this evening. I've not gone that far down the road, but it does. It seems quite, perhaps it's especially Greek to say that it's logical that if there are gods, then they wouldn't necessarily like humans, and they would have human emotions.
Yeah, I think they're forces, aren't they? More than
I think it's.
anything else.
I always see it as a kind of a way of reckoning with our own existence, and we create figures that represent the fact that the universe seems to hate us. It keeps trying to kill us. Oh, but then we had that nice day, do you remember? So that's another person, and then we sort of try and cram them together. It doesn't really work. Just let's write stories about them fighting.
Yeah.
And that's why they make great stories. That's where we live, right in the middle of the triangle.
And I think, this idea of just like an all-powerful, benevolent deity, it's a very modern sort of monotheistic idea. Within most polytheistic religious structures. Every deity is very different and much more sort of human in a sense, because they get embroiled in these kind of dramas. And it's from those dramas that you can teach behavior and ethics and morals and all that kind of stuff. Plus, it's fun because it's full of drama, rather than all praise the one and only God that is everything, you know? And so there's a certain level of drama there that I think it makes for a good story.
I'm kind of scratching my memory. I'm trying to remember if it was Democritus, one of the Greek philosophers, who suggested that if horses had gods, they would look like horses. And I think that's the essence of Greek mythology. And in some ways, that's kind of the essence of human faith, in that we do tend to humanize these things. But if there are gigantic forces abounding, then they will not necessarily resemble us or act like we do.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is taking a very theological.
No, I was just thinking as well, like some of them we found with the book that some of the characters, especially towards the end of the book, the kind of primordial gods and stuff, they were they were foils for bigger stories. They in themselves really, you know, the writers worked really hard to get enough content together. Sorry, can you hear my dog?
Yeah, but it's okay.
Sorry. I think someone just knocked at the door and she's gone mad. Sorry, yes. So, I completely forgot what I was saying.
Primordial gods.
Yes, so the primordial gods, some of the writers that had to deal with them, I did feel a bit sorry for them. They did an amazing job, but they clearly, there aren't huge stories about them. They just kind of went, sun, god, wind, guess that's a god. Like, it's just and they were like parents. They were just kind of like, well, where did the gods come from? And then they'd went, well, other gods, you know, were there. We don't know anything about them, but they started it. So, and that was it. That was all that we had on those ones. So, and there might be like a bit here and there in different myths, different stories. You can kind of pull it out and go, oh, that was them as well. But yeah, that's quite interesting.
I think it's all a kind of way of, it's the history of, you know, we being the universe looking at itself, which we are. We're just a bit of the universe. It's a kind of history of the universe trying to look at itself, and I just love the bit in and finding different ways of talking about it, and never making any sense. But I just love the bit, you know, at the end of Gulliver's Travels, when he's had all these adventures, and he ends up in, I think that, I don't know how you pronounce the last race, but they're horses. It's a horse, talking intelligent horse race called the Hooinghams or something like that. It's like what the noise the horses make. And at the end of the story, and I wish this would be put into more of the films of it, which are just about the big and little people. He's writing it. He's talking about how wise these horses are, and he wants to live like them. And he's basically living in the stable back home with the horses. And simultaneously, you've got him talking, you know, coming to this wonderful conclusion. And you've got the fact that he's clearly completely mad. He's standing in the stable telling you this story. And you're like, right, okay. And I think that's through every kind of literature, the conclusions we come to about ourselves. And these stories do it beautifully. It's so exciting.
Yeah, it's trying to make sense of the world around you, and that's what myth is, and it is today as it was then. They were trying to make sense of the world, not objects around them. We're using the same myth to try and make sense of our society and what's, you know, going on in ourselves and identity and everything. So
yeah, for sure. So okay, do you want to move on and do some plugging for Working Classicists a little bit? So what are the range of activities, promotions, and things like that you do for Working Classicists? You have your zine,
we've kind of pared things back while the book has been taken center stage. We do try to platform writers on a regular basis, and we even go as far as doing the radical thing of paying them. Not much, because we are, we have meager resources, but we do have the principle that if you write, you shouldn't have to write for exposure, as I think it's called. So we pay our writers. So if anyone wants to, if somebody's got an idea about something to do with ancient history or the classical world, whether it's historical, philosophical, mythological, anything at all from that, space, if you want to write for us, then do drop us an email and we'll hash something out, because this year I think we really do want to put forward more and more writers. We want to give the space over to other people, and I think it's only through providing that platform, that stage for other people, that people will start to ask questions in their communities, such as, why doesn't my school have a classics department? Why can my kids not have access to the study of these things? So it's really about building the community. So the zine is the big one that I want to push here today. Miri might kill me if I've forgotten something I should be promoting.
No, it's just that, yeah, with the zine, like we're a social enterprise, we're a not-for-profit, so the first 2 years we just funded it ourselves from like our wages or whatever, so we didn't have a lot of kind of money to throw at this, but obviously with the book and everything, we're now going to start offering a bit of a higher pay for people that write for us and stuff, so we've paused it slightly so that we can have a bit of a think about what we offer people when they write for us, you know, if it's their first time writing, stuff we learned through doing the book, really. And we're not a journal, so it can be, you know, reviews of video games, it can be stuff about music, it can be poetry, it can be fiction, it can be anything, really. It's more the case of like, I know when I started journalism how difficult it was to get anything without having something already. And that is just a bizarre like paradox that you just get stuck in, where it's like, well, I don't have experience, but I can't get experience without experience. So it's more that we want to platform people who maybe come from these backgrounds, as you know, as we do, and they want to be able to point to something and go, well, I've been published, my work's here, you can read it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how the zine started, and how it still is, really. So it's, in terms of building a community, that's a big thing for us. But I think the other side of, and community wise as well, like we've got Discord, we've got Blue Sky, all this sort of stuff, and like we do giveaways and we do kind of connect people. If they've got questions, we'll go, oh, has anyone got an answer? Or, you know, we try and foster that sense of community. But then I think the other strength of the website, which George pretty much built single-handedly over a period of months, and it, you know, it's got so much stuff on it. Like it's one of those ones, like when I was young and I'd ask my parents if I could use the computer, and they'd be like, yeah, you can be on it for an hour, and I'd go on a website and I'd just hang out on a website. And I think maybe people don't do that quite as much anymore. It's like they'll just Google what they want and get it. But I think if you go to the site and you do hang around on it, you know, you will find all kinds of stuff. We've got loads and loads, is it like more than 100 downloads of different
yeah, there's a load of original texts. They're not recent translations. They tend to be out of copyright, which is how we've managed to source them. But in the resources section, there's more than 100 different classical texts, some in Latin, some in Greek, some in translation into English. We've got research links, which will help to guide you if you're looking for, you know, for example, I think there's a number of links to take you to different maps, some links that will take you to numismatics, coins, websites, little bits and pieces like that. We're trying to assemble more learning materials so that especially school pupils in Scotland who maybe attend a school that doesn't provide classics, they might have a way in if we can provide the resources for that. We are producing, we're constantly producing new stuff, but it's exhausting, to be honest, to do this on top of a full-time job. I'm sure that's something you can relate to, Flint. to have this in the background, and when the thing in the background could actually be as big as your full-time job, and it is tiring and it takes it out. So we're kind of trying to get that balance right, but at the same time we don't want to shortchange anyone. So if there's anything that anybody is looking for on the website and they can't find, or if there's something they would like to see on the website, I will run at that 100 miles an hour and see if we can get that up for you. So really, it'll be driven by the community. Whatever they want on the site, we will do our best to put it there. And in the process, we'll try and promote as many writers from as many backgrounds as we possibly can, and hopefully it will open some doors for some people. And that's about at the moment, that's as much as I could hope for, but there'll be more in the future.
There's some stuff as well about self-study, because obviously with it being so rare, self-study is going to become kind of increasingly the way that you get into it. And so yeah, George is working on getting a course on there that's just sort of free and anyone can do it. But also, you know, the resources on there basically are designed to kind of support you, like whatever stage you're at. So there's a bit for kind of school age and a bit for, you know, slightly older people. And, you know, there's a load of downloads, research links. It's hopefully it is, you know, if you want a film or you want a day out with your kid, it's hopefully all on there. Yeah, and there's like funding your studies as well, which is where you can get in the UK, especially where you can get bursaries to study classics and, you know, those kind of subjects. Yeah, it's just like there's just a load of stuff, and we do our awards every year as well. So obviously we are always going to be going through cycles of looking for nominations for the awards, because a lot of the time the people doing a lot of work don't get any recognition, and we kind of want to redress that balance a little bit. So yeah, there's all this kind of stuff to sift through. And obviously, like, all of it is free. We want all of it to always be free. We do take donations on Ko-Fi to fund everything. That's how we run. We've got people who've been, you know, doing monthly donations for years now, and like those people are funding all of this, you know. So yeah, like, it's literally just there, up for grabs. Like, if there's anything missing that you want, like, George obviously has teaching materials and supplies and decorations for classrooms and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, I mean, we can kind of just do whatever people need as well.
I just dropped the donation link in. If anybody wants to go, their Ko-fi page is there, and you can donate to support this. And yeah, so they have just a ton of resources on there if you're interested in learning languages or interested in delving into this stuff. So it's going to vary, because we had a question here from Lone Fellow asking about, is there anything you would advise to aspiring ancient language self-learners? And so they have a whole section there on the website of good books and other things like that. Yeah.
I think the ancient languages is it will depend largely on what your experience of learning languages has been in the past. If you have learned French or Spanish or another language to any level, then tailor your learning accordingly. The book I always recommend for learning Latin, largely because it opened the language up to me, is by a guy called William Linney. It's called Getting Started with Latin, and it literally goes one page, one word, and progressively builds up, and it adds on your noun and your verb endings. And I made such progress through that very, very slow and deliberate and simple stage-by-stage method that I was able, I mean, I did my degree and master's. I've gone beyond that book, but I tried the Cambridge Latin course and Ecce Romani, and they're good, but that particular one by William Linney was a bit of a game changer for me. So have a look at the books that are available to you, but also, if you don't know what a noun or a verb is, as was the case for me, literally an English teacher, I'm exaggerating very slightly. That book just, it cracked it open for me, and the whole language suddenly came alive, and I understood how it worked.
There's also, sorry to butt in, but we've just found out, in fact, that there's also a Getting Started with Ancient Greek version, and there's a Furthering Your Studies with Latin one, which comes after this one. We had them, he very kindly donated us a few copies, and we've just done them in a giveaway, so a few people have received those, so we'll be interested to hear how they get on with them, because yeah, we both read that one and found that to be the best one.
Interesting. Yeah, I noticed you don't have Wheelock there.
I thought everybody had Wheelock. I didn't need to put it there.
Yeah, I've taught with both
Which do you
Wheelock
think is
and
easier,
English.
Latin or Greek?
Sorry, what was that, Ross?
Which do you think is easier, Latin or Greek?
Latin.
Yeah. Really?
I
Why?
actually find Greek easier.
I would have thought Greek.
I think that I find Greek kind of more poetic and slightly more beautiful, but because I'm not au fait as with the alphabet, and I can't read it as instinctively, I do find Latin it delivers more quickly to me. So that's probably down to the speed at which I can read the stuff. But if I had more time to brush up my Greek, maybe Greek would be my favorite of the two. But yeah, with Greek, obviously you've got to engage with a completely new alphabet, and that takes some adjustment.
It does, but my problem with Latin is that depending on the context of when a word is written, so whether it's in like Ovid or Catullus or Caesar, it can mean very different things because the vocabulary for Latin is very small.
Absolutely.
And so what that means is like there's no real nice key to a definition of a term because it can mean like this or that or the opposite even. It's just like how we say, oh my God, that was so bad, or that was wicked when we mean good. The ancient Romans did that, and that drove me nuts when learning Latin. While with Greek, there's such a much larger vocabulary, and each word means what it means. And so you have less of that sort of different terms taking on different meanings. And so that's why I find Greek easier in my mind, is because you know what that word means when you see it.
This is another reason I love the whole like interpretations thing though, because it also depends on who's translating it, and that's why it's important to have different backgrounds again as well, because the translations can be completely different depending on the context in which you're reading it and the background from which you're coming at it from, because you like the same person could look at the text and come up with like fairly different translations, and both are kind of valid. You can't say there's a one true translation.
Yeah, I think me and Ross have spoken about this a lot, because I think we're less reading about classic stuff, more reading about like theology stuff. And we had a conversation about this a few months ago, where it's like a lot of what is accepted in a lot of kind of modern religions and things, like the translation of a translation of a translation of a translation, and it's kind of like, well, that's just what it means, that's just what it says in the book. And it's like, well, yeah, but several thousand years ago, that could have been a million different things that could have meant. And like that's really interesting from that perspective. And then I guess you just find that again and again, these studying something that is that old, and you kind of have to allow it to grow and change and flourish, but not be like that's what it is, that's what it says.
That's really important.
Let's see. We have a comment about liking the foils for other stories. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I did feel a bit sorry for people that got like, the random primordial kind of beings, but they did very well. They did very well with them, I think.
I remember being particularly impressed by people who managed to separate Thalassa and Oceanus or Oceanus. It's gods and goddesses which are so similar, and there's so much crossover, but you manage to sort of, I nearly said part the oceans, and that I'm sorry everyone, it's been a long day.
It's impossible to get through.
But yeah, those two I genuinely, because my knowledge of them wasn't particularly great, so it was really brilliant to read them and get very distinct characters out of concepts which, in my mind at least, weren't particularly distinct.
Yeah, I think that's key to be able to try to do that, because people would have seen these as distinct in the past. We did have a question way up high. Let me see if I can find it. It was about, is Roman mythology just a knockoff of Greek mythology? Especially because you obviously cited a lot of Roman literature in this book on Greek mythology.
Yeah.
So, yeah, how did you think about thinking on those?
We adopted Ovid, and we just decided, fine, Ovid wrote about it, I'll take that. obviously it gets processed through that particular lens, and Hesiod is, because his if we're going to use Hesiod as a core text, his myths aren't as fleshed out, whereas Ovid really humanizes these characters, and I think that was really important. And again, maybe that says something about the 21st century, that we want our mythological characters to have that sense of backstory and depth and humanity. And as for whether Roman mythology is a knockoff of Greek mythology, they borrowed liberally. They were very inclusive in their pantheon. So I'm not the person to ask about how much one is independent of the other. Certainly, the Romans, not just with the Greeks, they were pretty inclusive. If they found a deity that they liked and thought was useful, then they tended to just take it home with them, kind of like the British Museum. So
let's not go there. Ixnay on the Museum Bay.
But Mithras is not a Roman deity, but he was a really big deal for the Romans. Isis, not a Roman deity, but again a really big deal. So they were quite liberal in the way they incorporated things, and maybe that's just a spiritual pragmatism. This god will serve for this particular purpose. How that feeds into mythology and storytelling, I am not expert enough to offer an answer on that. But certainly Hesiod and Ovid were very much our starting points for the characters. But in the periodic table that we have, we also have dramatis personae as well. So we went slightly rogue and started incorporating characters from drama. Dionysus, for example, should be, you would argue, in the section marked for the Olympian gods. He's actually in dramatis personae for fairly, again, practical reasons from our point of view, in that he fitted into that section more than he fitted into the Olympian section. So you'll have to take our interpretation of these deities with a grain of salt. What I will say is the writing of these characters and the research for these characters is way better than I'm doing them justice here.
I think the book as a whole, because obviously everyone has different backgrounds as well, it's hard to sort of, as some of them came in, it became clear where they fit because of what that person's expertise was and because of what they'd written about that character. Because obviously some of the characters, I'm saying there wasn't a lot to write. Some of them there was loads to write. There was, they're in everything. They're in all the stories. They're everywhere. And it was very interesting to see what people wrote and then go, oh, okay, yeah, well, that fits in that section for sure. So I mean, that was part of it as well. And we couldn't do a book like that and not have the Trojan War and all that sort of stuff in it, because that's what people expect as well. I think when they pick up a book on that topic, that's they're going to want a bit of that. So we tried to kind of incorporate all the big hitters, all the big names, but there will be plenty of people and concepts and things that were missed out.
It's a jumping off point. I think the reason for me, what hits me the most with it is I started on this journey because I was interested in a few things, but the real sort of galvanizing moment was just coming across Medea the Witch Maiden in the Tales of the Greek Heroes, and then I was like, sign me up. And that was obviously just pieces of little bits of stories, and this is the same thing. If someone can be scanning through it, come across one thing and they go, oh, that's really piqued my interest, now I'll go do all the massive wider reading because I can't get enough of it. So that's to the potential for someone to have the same effect that I had by reading this book is what's super special about it.
Yeah,
that's a really nice thought. I like that. Honestly, if the book has that influence on one person, it's a success, because it's the ripples in the pond, isn't it? That we do the work and then we see how it goes out into the world, and if it causes somebody to pursue an interest, or the word I've been using this word endlessly in my particular role promoting classics, and it's all about the enthusiasm. If we can engender enthusiasm in a readership, then that enthusiasm is an engine that will drive people many, many miles.
Yeah.
So if we have that effect, I will be more than delighted. Yes, we are all in cupboards under stairs like Harry Potter. Just wanted to clear that up.
Someone also
Let
complimented
me
my
out.
Lego Colosseum, so thanks.
Yes.
It's actually my partner's who's obsessed with Lego, and I personally don't really quite get Lego. So they combined our interest by being like, well, what if I get the Colosseum one? And I was like, okay, fine.
Concession both ways.
It's interesting to set out to build a ruin as well.
Just stop halfway through.
That's pretty deep, isn't it? Right.
Smash it down when you're done.
Can I say as well about the book that I was just sent my copy the other day, and I was amazed to find the size of it.
Yeah.
And how big.
Yeah, it's a big.
I thought it was going to be weeny, and it's so big and beautiful. And that just happens to be the page I wrote, by the way.
That's so conveniently bookmarked.
Yeah. Well, they included a bookmark, so I was forced to put it somewhere. It's a gorgeous book.
Yeah, I mean, again, to give a shout out to Conte Vinales as well, like the amount of effort that they put in. You know, editing is one thing. You know, I edited everyone's work, gave them feedback, re-edited, you know, did all that stuff, and it did take a while. It took, you know, the best part of a year to get it kind of from nothing to something. But then when I sent it to them, you know, they're responsible for, you know, they contacted Cora Beth Fraser, who did the illustration of the periodic table. It's a really nice one. They got all the images. They did all the layout. They did the front cover. You know, like they're also very, very responsible for the look and the feel of the whole thing as well.
It's such a beautiful like coffee table book. Like you can. I have mine standing up on my like sideboard, and it just looks like decoration. It's beautiful.
Yeah, they were really good with that and really focused on it. And they're also a really small team. You know, I think they're just 2 people as well. So the fact that they put in that much effort, like, obviously would recommend if anyone's in the market for a publisher. But yeah, it did turn out really nice, actually.
Very cool. Yeah. So the images, I'm guessing they got a lot of out of copyright type stuff from like the 19th century or so.
Yeah, that's right.
Costumes, yeah, which is
and
great.
Then, yeah, the table obviously was like an original design. But yeah, everything else was kind of woodcuts and kind of vintage imagery stuff. It was amazing. I was amazed they managed to find one for everyone, honestly.
Yeah, seriously. That's for sure. All right. Well, cool. Any last things you want to pitch or promote or say or something?
Just
I have an idea for merch.
Oh, okay. What's your idea?
A Matt Damon toilet brush.
That's a shout.
You know, you can say a lot with one of those.
That's a shout.
You got his head in his helmet, and then it just scrubs the toilet.
Or like a dish brush or something. Yeah, ideal.
I am in the market for a baby bottle cleaning brush.
Yeah,
so, you know.
Get one of them. Mm-hmm. Just get Matt Damon to come round.
And so what's going to come next? A periodic table of Roman historical figures, or a periodic table of archaeological sites, or what?
Well, these are all excellent ideas.
Practically, I think,
well,
yeah, I think
brush ideas catching on.
I think practically what's going to happen is that we need to see, first of all, because obviously the book is amazing. We're really proud of it, but like we are still a social enterprise trying to do stuff and put, the whole point of it is to raise funds for what we're trying to do. So I think now that it's out, and once we've had our launch party next month, we'll want to kind of take stock a little bit. We're going to relaunch the zine, as I said, so that's going to kind of be ongoing, and the site obviously is what it is. But once we've kind of assessed where the sales leave us, we want to be doing more stuff. We don't just want to be like book number 2, it was, as exciting as that would be, it's like, yeah, but we want to do outreach, we want to do
tangible action.
Yeah, we want to do community projects, we want to get the ball rolling, we want to, you know, we've got plans for, you know, bursaries for people to attend conferences, and like all this stuff is brewing in the background, and it will just be really nice to be able to sit with it and go, should we do that stuff now? You know, now that all this is done. So yeah, I think that's what's next. But also Ross and Jackie, who I think I'm pointing at, but maybe not, are also great writers, and you should hire them for writing things. That's my final comment on there.
Hire them to write. Cool. All right. Well, this was a great conversation, and I really appreciate meeting you all, and I hope we can do another collaboration at some point in the future. And
thank you so much for having
do
us
some
on.
good stuff. And thanks everybody for popping by. It was great. Remember to leave a like, leave a comment, boost this stuff in the algorithm so that we can, you know, fight off all the hokey shit that's out there on YouTube, and we can get some real stuff out there, like, you know, real good stuff, authentic stuff. And yeah, we left the link for the book. Go check it out if you're interested. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Love
you.
and archaeology and working classicists for everybody.
Bye.